Good morning, all. Thanks for arriving so bright and breezy and ready for a very big and important day on developing. I'm part of developing a long-term plan for the 2027-2037 period. Yeah. That's good. And just checking that your earphones are plugged in and you are listening. And that's really good to show that my first fault has been picked up, but I forgot to turn my microphone on. So today is about our current state briefings, getting understanding what we are doing here at ORC, and it's based on our 2026-27 plan delivery, what we do, why we do it, what it costs, and who is involved. So it will be a great catch up for us today. We had yesterday our assumptions, our non-financial assumptions that we passed and are working through. At the end of each session, the morning, the afternoon, and again tomorrow, Jasmine will send us a survey out to just to check as a touchstone to us to make sure that we are getting enough information, the right information, or if there's any other information that we require. We have a scheduled break at 10:45. We'll be starting off with the Environmental Delivery Directorate, and we are on a reasonably tight time frame to get through everything. But if we have spare time, we will probably adjourn as a group and have a bit of a catch up to make sure we are getting the things that we need, and if we have any questions. We will just simply keep piling up the directorates as we go, but just be very sure that you are getting enough information at any time. Just don't hesitate to stop us and have a chat through anything that you need. So I'll hand directly over to Jasmine and we'll get the show underway. But just before I do, Neil is going to be online. Gary is in transit and will be online. Gretchen's the same. And everything will be being recorded. So if there is something you were unsure of as well and need further clarity, you can go back to that recording. Thank you, Jasmine.
Kia ora, good morning. Thank you. It's very exciting to be at this part of the LTP development phase. So we're heading towards the end of the context setting part of the LTP. So this is one of the foundational pieces, which is an opportunity for managers to go into some more detail around what we're currently delivering. So this is very focused on annual plan 26-27. So it's looking at the year ahead, but it's an opportunity for councillors to ask questions and get more detail around what we're delivering, how we're delivering, and why we're delivering. So although it's focused on the current state, the annual plan for this year, it's an opportunity to really get that detail and reflect on what we're currently delivering so that as we move into the next phase of activity build for LTP, councillors have the information they need and can start thinking around scope and scale going forward. So the format for today, managers will come in their directorates, they will give a brief introduction. You have the current state briefing sheets there. After a 5-10 minute introduction from managers, it'll be open to councillors for questions. If there's things that we don't have granular detail on in front of us, we will go away and can share that with councillors. So I think that's probably enough from me, and I will hand over to the Environmental Delivery Directorate. Thank you.
And councillors, you'll note in front of you that I've also dropped our priority actions for the 26-28 part of our triennium, but if you want to refer to that at any stage. And welcome Libby, Alex, Joe, and Simon.
Sorry, we were playing musical chairs there. I don't know why, but we were. Oh, the floor is mine. Right, good morning, everybody. So the Environmental Delivery Group supports the implementation and monitoring the rules, programs and initiatives that help protect and improve Otago's environment while supporting and empowering communities. The team are based across Otago. Our work spans 5 key teams and is largely mandatory work which needs to be completed under a range of legislation, but there are also some non-mandatory areas and areas that support mandatory work. Our work delivers on commitments that have been made to the community through a range of planning documents, strategies and work programs, and also supports a range of council and priority actions. I'll give a brief overview of the teams and then hand over to the managers. So environmental implementation supports the delivery of environmental improvement programs on the ground, works with communities, landowners, iwi catchment groups and partners to improve land, water, biodiversity and biosecurity outcomes. They lead catchment action plans, environmental funding programs, integrated catchment management and regional pest management plan delivery. Consents processes resource consents and regulatory approvals under environmental legislation. They help enable development and resource use while ensuring environmental effects are appropriately managed, and they provide advice and support to applicants, stakeholders and communities. Our compliance team ensures consent holders in the wider community comply with environmental rules and consent conditions. They deliver monitoring, investigations, education and enforcement activities. We also maintain and deliver a 24/7 pollution response service and respond to environmental incidents across our region. Our environmental delivery data and systems team provides the systems, data, reporting and operational support that underpin all environmental delivery functions. They ensure our regulatory compliance and environmental information is accurate, accessible and supports effective decision making across the group. And our Harbour Master team, so Steve, our Harbour Master is an apology today, but I will have our Deputy Harbour Master, Pete Dryden. I say his name and he appears, magical timing. So our Harbour Master team ensures the safe use of Otago's coastal waters, harbours and lakes, noting that we don't cover the Kia Ora Sea area. We maintain navigational safety, deliver boating safety education campaigns, support maritime pollution response and help keep commercial and recreational water users safe. Together, these teams provide a balanced approach to education, partnership, regulation, compliance and operational delivery. They work closely with all parts of the organisation to protect Otago's environment and to support communities and deliver the outcomes expected by Council and the region. So I'll now pass over to Libby, who's first on the list.
Joe.
Thank you. So I'm the manager of the environmental implementation team. So environmental implementation is responsible for turning Council's environmental strategies, plans and funding into practical on-the-ground outcomes across Otago. Our work focuses on 4 key areas: delivering biodiversity and biosecurity programs, supporting catchment and community-led environmental action, implementing catchment management and restoration initiatives, and administering environmental funding and incentive programs. The majority of our work is driven by statutory responsibilities under the Biosecurity Act, Regional Pest Management Plan, and Council decisions through the long-term plan. We provide both mandatory services such as pest surveillance, compliance, and incursion response, and discretionary programs that support communities, landowners, and partners to improve environmental outcomes. Environmental implementation also has a key role in delivering a number of Council's priority actions. This includes strengthening rabbit management through practical on-the-ground programs, partnerships, and landowner collaboration, assessing opportunities for a step change approach to lagrosiphon control, supporting community-led wild and pine initiatives, and advocating for sustainable funding arrangements, accelerating implementation of catchment action plans and integrated catchment management initiatives, and implementing the Environmental Fund to target investment towards agreed environmental outcomes. The team also supports landowner-led environmental projects and can support delivery of council investment to achieve freshwater improvements. We also support the delivery of environmental outcomes through non-regulatory approaches to support Otago communities and ecosystems. A significant part of our role is working alongside communities, runaka, industry groups, landowners, and government agencies to deliver practical projects that improve water quality, biodiversity, land management, and ecosystem health. This includes supporting catchment action plans, community biosecurity programs, restoration projects, and environmental grant funding. The team has 36.4 FTE, with staff based in offices across the region and an operating budget of approximately 15.2 million, with around 73% funded through targeted rates, supplemented by grants, subsidies, and reserve funding. Much of our effort is focused on protecting Otago's environmental assets, managing current and emerging biosecurity threats, and supporting delivery of Council's environmental priorities and long-term outcomes. So that's a brief overview of what the slide shows. So now, if there's any questions, then happy to answer them.
How much does the ORC fund OCC, the Otago Catchments communities, every year?
So we currently fund them $430,000 per year.
Andrew.
Look, I don't know if we're asking too much. This is great information. Thank you. And you're the first up, so you get the hard questions. The understanding the lines on the white pages aren't the same as the lines here, and it's putting. I mean, I would have really liked to have had another budget line there answering Robbie's question. Really, what are the quantum in each project and the catchment advisors and things? Is that really difficult to supply? Because we get, yeah.
I'm sorry, Kate, what white lines and what page are you talking about? Just to help the team at the side.
If we look at pages 4 of 13, those line items aren't quite the same as the line items on the.
So, and there is currently, and this is what we are working through in the LTP, there is a disconnect between our work. I don't know how I'd categorise them. Basically, the tasks we are carrying out and the way in which our work orders are budgeted. So there's some work going on between Jasmine and Sean, and between Nick and Amanda to make sure through this process there is really good alignment and clarity in the budgets aligned back to the we call them projects or actions or programs, whatever we call them. So appreciate that an additional column next to BAU/project that had a dollar figure would have been helpful. It's not as simple as that currently. I suppose this in terms of what we're working towards as we have over the last few years is trying to improve the quality and level of information we provide during deliberations. That's what you will see when we build the first cut of the LTP.
Well, that's great. And just testing the mandatory, non-mandatory, I think there was something here about, and I'm not against it, don't get me wrong, the ICN work and the TARI, you've got this mandatory because it's an agreement. That's contractual. It's not mandatory. It's it's a discretionary activity, isn't it, that we've chosen to do? Yeah.
I mean, yes and no. So I mean, it's mandatory because we've got a contract we need to meet our obligations under, but it's not mandatory in terms of a legislative driver. So
And that's again just testing when we do these things.
Yeah, no, that's good. Point of clarification. Thanks, Kate.
Mandatory for staff.
Yeah.
No, the organisation signed up to it, so it's one of those. Mandatory can be, there's a few different ways in which something becomes mandatory, and in that case, it's contractual. In other cases, it's statutory. Yeah.
Well, because we had that conversation. So under the Te Hakapupu maintenance, it's got non-mandatory, but have we got contractual obligations with the planting sites to do the maintenance? Because that is different.
Yes, we will have an obligation for the 3 years we'd signed up with the landowners to say that we'd do support maintenance for.
So that is mandatory or contractually mandatory?
Potentially, we can look into it.
Well, and again, it's a consistency thing. I know that no one else has done that. So
no, I mean, if we apply the same principle, there's a contract, we've got an obligation, and if we've applied mandatory to other parts,
okay, and that's why I'm testing those. Thank you. Sorry,
Andrew, then Hillary.
On the same topic, under the funding and support agreement that we've got for the TARI ICM coordinating role within the existing budget 26-27, have we the ability to apply that same formula with those parties if they're willing for the existing caps that already, the Caplan's cap, and also Upper Lakes and the others that will follow, inland, Lower Clifford, and obviously Dunedin and Whangatō.
So that, let me know if I'm not understanding the question, but so the agreement we have for that coordinator position is with Okaha and Department of Conservation and ORC. So there's a three-way partnership we have to employ the coordinator. So for the other caps, we don't have a setup specifically around.
It's in the Arbor project.
Yes,
isn't
yeah.
It's under,
Can you just
it's
explain
under-
that part of it, Libby,
Yeah.
that it's
So
not actually the same as our ICM
No,
program?
it's not the same as our ICM program. So it's under the Ngāawa partnership, which is between Mana Whenua and DOC. And DOC have selected specific, I don't know how many they've got across the country, but they have specific waterways that they're looking to focus on, and the Taieri is one of those. So there's already a partnership in place there, which ORC have come into because we have our ICM work occurring. So that agreement ends this year. So the funding will cease at the end of this year unless we enter another agreement with.
I suppose my question is, any other opportunities for the similar type of partnership, obviously driven externally rather than by us, within the 26-27 current year, have the ability to stitch together other similar like partnerships if they were to arise? That was my question.
Yes. Yes, we have the ability to do that.
All right.
Two sort of general things. Could we have a different category? I don't think mandatory or non-mandatory is sort of quite the right word for something that we have contracted to do, but we can choose to stop the contract. So it's not mandatory. It's a different category of something we have currently. Like we employ everybody. That doesn't make employing people mandatory. It just means we've
So
got an agreement.
Desmond will have a look at that for when we start preparing the next tranche, which is looking forward to LTP. We'll have a look at how we capture contractual commitments.
Lovely. And the other thing is when there's big lots of sundry expenses, are they chosen to be put in sundry for things because they're over a particular amount, or because some things that we do have in lists are reasonably minor, and then there's like $2 million in sundry or something.
Do you want to?
Wondering how.
I'm going to pass that one over to the far corner because it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, Hilary. Sorry.
It's because all the posting codes are standard accounting general ledger codes. If you go through, there's courses and conferences, contractors, consultants, advertising, repairs and maintenance. So all the sort of things categories that you see, and then you get things that don't necessarily fit into those. In this particular area, like the other sundry, one of the biggest ones would be, that's where we put the payments that the funding payments that we give out to the likes of OCC and the large scale environment fund, SAT and sundry. So there's not sort of another one. There is a council subsidy contribution. We sometimes use that one. So it's sort of split between those two. But effectively, other sundry is just where everything sits if it doesn't actually meet one of those other posting code categories, effectively.
Yeah, sorry, it's not that I don't understand the word sundry. It's that it's a big chunk, and I would have thought a wee bit more granularity. Find some more categories or something which would help us. And the other bit of that is to have like reserve funding.
So the categories are standard in our financial system, but I think this goes back to Kate's question, which is how are we presenting our overall budgets aligned to work programs? So this is just taken from the accounting system, and these are set. And so we've used that for today in terms of current state. We can certainly break down the sundry expenses within the different sections of the document. But again, probably back to the first point that was raised, and that is what we're working towards as we start to develop the year 1 to the LTP budget. So there's clarity around each of these.
Yeah, so Harry, I think when we get that next column, and if we just particularly use the funding support for Otago catchment groups, although that is under sundry, we will in our column it will have the $430,000 that we put there, and that all those on that column will still add up to the 15.156 million, and on next one it will still come under sundries in the balance sheet part, but our line items will show us what that sundry actually is.
Right, and just one last wee bit on the same area. I'd like to see teased out whether something's reserve funded, by which we mean we've evened out the expenditure over 10 years or something, whatever, and something that is actually just effectively borrowing from one place to another. When it says reserve funding, it has this sort of innocuous feel about it. And it is innocuous if it's sort of a smoothing process. But if it's spending money we don't have, then it's a different thing. I'd just like to see that teased out a wee bit in the way we present things sooner or later. I know that's not an accounting answer, but
That's all good.
Just on level services which are functional but not outcome driven. And I'm not sure if these are the discussions we have today or another time. I appreciate they're ours, they're not yours, and because we own them, because we put them in the plan, I presume. But the outcomes are, have 10 workshops. I would love to understand if we should be reporting the outcomes of those workshops. And I don't necessarily mean that attendance. Look, we've had wonderful quality people turning up at pest management. It's not quantity that counts all the time, but it's the outcomes of having that investment in OCC or the outcomes of investing in the ICM. Have we trapped 20 possums or 200? And I think that reporting and that surety of value is important. So I'm not sure if that's a discussion we have today, Chair, or where that happens.
I just hand over to the far corner.
We can certainly take that feedback, and when we come to look at the levels of service for the LTP, we can take that into consideration for better designed measures that are more outcome focused.
Okay, and value focused, but that's up to whether everyone else agrees as well.
Yeah.
I'm just one voice.
Value focused and outcome orientated.
Thank you.
And we have Matt, Chanel, Bobby.
Just a quick question, and now it doesn't need to be the answer, but I just trying to join all the dots with the conversation yesterday. But I see the bottom of the biosecurity program one on what I call page 4, legislation and control funding with LIMS, and then I just didn't know where the dots are in terms of where what that figure is when it comes through the reading budget as well.
So the cut.
Was that co-funding?
It's not so we provide funding to LIMS for leg recycling control. I don't believe DOC do. That's what the question was.
Oh, basically how much are we spending?
So we've got 50,000 in our budget that we provide towards that.
Okay, cool.
And there's the strategic priority action around a step change in terms of funding or eradication for leg recycling that we are looking at through the LTP process.
And my only other question, then I realised halfway through my brain cells going off, is like, obviously when there's mandatory tied to an act, and if that act is getting changed, then obviously what's going to change is going to be significant. But then within 2 major acts coming through planning and natural environment, then there's basically an asterisk next to everything. So I think I'll withdraw that question.
Yeah, maybe just to cover that off, because it potentially does keep coming up. We do have a number of mandatory activities under the current Resource Management Act. I guess my expectation is that many of those activities will still be mandatory in the new acts, but how we are expected to do them will change, and the team will be doing a full assessment of that now that we know a little bit more still to be to go completely through the parliamentary process. But that will, as the LTP develops, start being reflected, and there'll be briefings and other things undertaken by Joe and Alex and Fleur and Anita that talks about how these new acts will change what we're responsible for.
Yep. Thank you. Chanel.
Apparently, I don't talk loud enough. I just have a couple of questions. It's a bit of a package. So with the Otago Biodiversity Forum, how much is allocated to that forum? And the second part of that question is, do we anticipate that, I guess, line item or activity continuing when we have a maturing Indigenous biodiversity strategy, CAPS, ICM? Do we see that continuing in the current state, or are we possibly looking at having some adjusted structures?
So I don't have the specific detail on how much the forum costs each year. There is some budget we have to deliver joint projects as well, so I can get that information for you. I believe that in the Indigenous biodiversity strategy, it's still included in there to support the forum, but we, as with all of our work, we'll keep looking at what the functionality of that is, reviewing whether it's important. But for this year, it's still in the budget. But yeah, as things evolve with CAPS, it may be superseded. I think it's useful in terms of a region-wide view of biodiversity rather than the place-based work we've got now. But we'll continue to review that and see if it's relevant.
Yeah, I guess I'm definitely not questioning the relevancy of any of these groups. It's more with evolving sort of delivery models. Yeah, how often we're checking in that they're everything is okay. And that also leads me to, we've mentioned what we fund for OCC. That's great. I guess in the long-term plan, I'll be looking to see where, not efficiencies, but where delivery efficiencies can be found in those, in that sort of package of systems. And I'll just have, another couple of questions. Where do Enviro schools fit in our funding?
So Enviro schools sit in Amanda's directorate, so that'll come later. And some of the work that the catchment advisors do support the work that Enviro schools deliver.
And I guess because you brought up Amanda, with the internal allocations and charges, I guess I'm just, from governance, looking to make sure that the corporate allocation of a activities budget isn't growing, whereas the operational delivery of the activities still remains similar. So I guess I'll be looking for some not granular detail, but enough that we can make some decisions to really see how much of an activities budget is also sits in corporate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So they'll, I think tomorrow, Tammy's and Nick's will walk through the same exercise for the activities that we largely fund is through overheads. And then, there will be the opportunity, again, the development of the future budgets to understand exactly that. What is our operational delivery, and then how much we're allocating through the overheads of both the corporate and finance functions.
And now we will have an annual report from OCC that we'll be getting soon that will be circulated to councils as well. And we'll have that in terms of our LTP picture as well.
Can you please explain what's included in iwi partnerships, contributions and payments? What's ongoing, what's project specific, and what is discretionary?
Could you please tell me which lines you're looking at?
They're in all of them.
Is this in the
no budget on
the white page?
So there's no budget. There's always an expense, but then no budget. Yeah, the white pages. Sorry, is it?
Page 4.
So I can tell you specifically what our iwi. I've got it in a different format to that. So for the approved budget through the annual plan for mana whenua engagement for biodiversity, and the EI team is 10,424. And then there's none in biosecurity, and then there's 10,424 for land and water, which is supporting our our water quality focused projects and catchment advisor work. And then in environmental management, which is the ICM budget, there is 10,200 as well. So for the ICM budget, that's supporting mana whenua involvement in developing catchment action plans and the work that Ōkaha and Te Ao Marama are doing to support on the governance board. For land and water, it's to support if there's a project that we're delivering and we need to involve mana whenua in that we can support them to do that work. And for biodiversity, it's similar. So things like on the Otago Biodiversity Forum, if when they're attending that, we can fund their input into that work.
So we are funding the Integrated Catchment Management Board.
We provide funding to the Ōkaha and Te Ao Marama staff that attend those meetings, yes.
Thank you.
And Ellen.
I'm returning to that discussion about reporting and levels of service and whatnot. We've had over the years that's sort of come up. Are we reporting on outcomes or are we reporting on outputs? And there is I'm just wondering where the place for this is going to be. The way the levels of service here and in the other directorates too, of course, tend towards reporting on outputs. And of course, that's much easier than trying to report on outcomes. But if we look at for example, the goals in our strategic directions, environment, ecosystems are healthy, our water, air are clean, biodiversity losses arrested. That's the outcome we're looking for. And I guess we have had this sort of discussion over the years and probably over longer years than I've been around. But that sort of reporting on those outcomes is much more telling, I guess. But I also recognise it is also much harder. So and in terms of the new long-term plan and setting up those levels of service, presumably that's the place to look at that. I guess I'd just be interested to know if there is a way of shifting to more meaningful outcome reporting rather than a list of those outputs, which are, of course, have some meaning, but don't give the whole picture.
So I can't speak to the design of the previous measures because that predates me. But absolutely, your suite of measures needs to demonstrate what's meaningful in terms of the service performance. So typically, best practice would be a mix of input, process, and output measures. The input and the sort of process measures would reside on the horizon or the radar of the activity, and then typically we would see the levels of service show those outcome measures. So to answer your question, as we go into the planning for the levels of service for the LTP, we will be looking to reposition that. So and clean both the sort of the measures up, but also the intent, so that they better capture what we do. Does that answer?
And if I could just jump in as well. So over here, we absolutely also have heard the questions around that broader outcomes monitoring. And so we've got a workshop scheduled on the 12th of August around an outcomes monitoring framework, which isn't the levels of service, which still do play a significant role in audit. And that has been one of the limitations of developing those levels of service in the past, is they've got to be measurable and auditable. But hearing that desire for broader outcomes monitoring, so there will be a framework tested with you in a few weeks, which would be looking at how we translate the community outcomes into a more measurable framework, but not the activity levels of service, which sits within that long-term plan audit sort of process. So they'll be complementary though and speak to each other.
Thank you. No, that's really good. And look, I'll look forward to that workshop. I think that will be really useful to have an exploration of that and get a better understanding of what we can do. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. Any more questions? Libby? Acceptable.
I just had one around legal costs. So what would typically sit within legal costs? They obviously pop up differently for each group, but in this one,
So that would generally sit in our biosecurity team. So if we were looking at doing an enforcement action and needed some advice around that, or if it was contested, then we would utilise those if needed. Thank you.
Hey,
So only because you mentioned it. So if it's not spent, does it just carry over and we don't have to budget for the next year, or what happens to their funds?
So if it's unspent, it's just it just goes into the reserve, either general reserve if it was general rate funded,
yeah,
or sits in the reserve for the targeted rate fund. So we don't automatically carry OPEX funding forward to the next year. We have, like we did last year, brought some decisions to council to say we will be underspent in these areas. Would you like to reserve fund next year through the surpluses you make this year? But that's not an automatic process that we apply. It's a decision that you need to make.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
And just because you mentioned targeted rates, I was quite surprised to see in here that the general coding, and I just does my head in this stuff, but the targeted rates, general targeted rates for the whole region, this really isn't your question, it's one for Nick. So you've got general targeted rates right over Otago, and then you've got targeted rates for river catchment areas and bus areas and everything. They're all 1115, is that right? They're not separated out into those constituent parts. Have I got that right?
In these reports, yeah, in the financials, like we that breakdown of that targeted rate code, it's just whatever the targeted rate is, it all just goes in there. It's not like we have a separate
coding
GL code, for every single targeted rate. Rates are only ever allocated in our general ledger as general and targeted. They actually go out in the rating system as a whole lot of different targeted rates, but they're just consolidated up into the general ledger as one targeted rate group. But typically, if you go back, we know, and I appreciate probably but we know, like in these particular areas, what targeted rate applies to what activities. Like biosecurity has the biosecurity targeted rate. All of the environmental implementation activity, when you see a targeted rate, it's now using the catchment management targeted rate. So and depending on if you like Dunedin transport, it's the Dunedin transport targeted rate. So generally the activity would lean you towards which targeted rate will be used, but we don't have a separate code for each one in the general ledger.
Thank you. I might ask questions on tomorrow.
Comfortable? Next cab off the rank. Alex.
Thank you so much. Right, so the consents team is responsible for processing, administering resource consents and other approvals under the Resource Management Act, Fast Track Approvals Act, National Environmental Standards, National Policy Statements and Regional Plans. The team delivers a mix of mandatory and discretionary services. Mandatory activities include processing resource consents from lodgement through to any appeals and implementation of national regulation. Discretionary activities include providing advice, guidance to applicants in the community, responding to public inquiries, and administering consent-related environmental enhancement funding. The team's work is primarily driven by key legislation, and at the moment a significant driver is the Fast Track Approvals Act, which is creating substantial workload through our role providing input into applications and acting as the consent authority for approved projects. Our work is important to the community because it enables development, infrastructure and resource use to occur whilst ensuring potential effects on the environment are appropriately considered and managed. Through efficient, robust and transparent decision making, the team support development and protects Otago's natural resources. We have two service levels. The first is 98% of resource consents are processed within statutory timeframes. And the second is that 100% of public inquiries are responded to within 7 working days. The team has approximately 22.5 FTE with staff based throughout the region.
in an operating budget of approximately 4.7 million, which is 60% funded through consent fees and charges and 40% funded through general rates. The team's work supports ORC's priorities and strategic direction, particularly the environment and community goals, by helping to achieve the outcomes sought through legislation, while supporting community stakeholders and partners through education and collaboration. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Mel?
Just 2 questions. So the bad and doubtful debts, what does that mean?
I might actually flip that over to Nick or Joe.
That's if we get any people effectively where the consents or whatever compliance isn't paid, and we end up having to write it off. Typically, we get funding up front, but there can be cases where people for whatever reason might walk away, and we pursue them and we can't get it. So yeah, there is an element of that, but we try to minimise it.
Thank you. And the second one is, how much do we spend on consent funding for environmental enhancement by community and catchment groups?
So we are currently funded $30,000. So that applies to any consent related costs for needing to get a consent for an environmental enhancement project. And then if they meet their compliance of that consent, they also get those funds relating to any compliance costs. Okay.
That's maximum funding of 30,000.
Yes.
Total.
Yeah.
Do we hit that?
So in previous years, it's been 50,000,
yeah,
and it dropped last year because we were spending around just over 30,000.
Andrew?
Just in relation to the fast track process, is the costs associated with ORC's involvement 100% cost recovered from the applicant?
Yes, so it is split quite similar to a normal consent process, where anything that's relating to a specific application is on charge to the applicant. There is certain things we do with community in terms of implementing that regulation, or going and talking to community groups around what the process within Fast Track is, that isn't funded by applicants, and that sits within our rates funded budget.
But I'm on page 7. The fees and charges there, I see the forecast for 25-26. It's quite a lot larger than the budget. Is that for any specific reason?
Yes, that was because of Fast Track.
Okay.
So we had, with Fast Track, we ended up having really large applications, and that meant that our charges to those is higher than what we would normally expect within a normal RMA processing year.
Do you think that's likely to continue, or is that?
That's quite a hard question, because if the Fast Track legislation hangs around, I would say potentially, because those are really large applications. I do think that there's been quite an influx at the start of the process for people getting into that process. So if it hangs around, yes, I would say that that probably is likely. However, it is very much dependent on the type of applications we get.
Probably just noting too that there is the equivalent increase in the fees and charges, about 4 or 5 lines up from that. So it is, we do see, and you'll see when we bring the year-end financial results, we've got a significant increase in our revenue, which effectively matches the expenditure that we're incurring. It wasn't budgeted at the start of the year. So I would say, while we can recover costs, there is a significant amount of management time that is not recoverable. So it is putting an enormous stress on the organisation in terms of staff time that is not recoverable. We certainly recover our reporting planners and any experts involved in the processes and legal advice. That's not a ratepayer cost as such, but there is a large amount of time for our senior staff to oversee this process and ensure that we are meeting deadlines and providing what we need that isn't recoverable and is effectively absorbed as part of the ratepayer costs. So it's one of those things that has been a priority for the government. Our team have done an excellent job, which has come back through the feedback directly from the panel chairs who are seeing these applications, but we have invested a lot of time and energy into getting that process right.
Matt?
I mean, based on that comment, Richard, can you put your fees up for this stuff if there's additional management time, and is fast track, is there fees set by the government, or can we put variations on that? Because, you know, if one applicant say, well, you know, if you're getting cost recovery from a farmer who puts in a thing down the road, but someone else you're not getting cost recovery from because they're a more complicated thing, then we shouldn't be going backwards, surely. I mean, I guess that you can't, you know, it's different when there's management time and that sort of stuff to purely account for it, but there must be a way to catch it.
Look, it's we could put fees up, but I think there is a role for you know, senior staff and oversight. We'd have to be careful that we weren't seen to be unfairly targeting fast track applicants. They've got a right to apply the same as everybody else does. So they're treated in the same way as any consents. I mean, the senior staff oversee all of the consents, whether it's a simple discharge consent or a fast track application. I guess I'm just pointing out to, you know, the comment that there is a sort of general view that all fast track costs are on charged, and they are, but it is a significant work program that brings with it, you know, a lot of oversight and pressure. We haven't increased our senior staff resources to oversee it. So I guess I'm just making the point that the time being spent on it from Alex and others is quite significant. And if it continues at the same rate, and we are also looking at significant transition programs through the new Resource Management Act, we are going to have to look at how we structure and appropriately resource all of that program.
And recover costs.
Yeah.
A question to that, Alex. So if we didn't have fast track, and like fast track may be bringing ahead projects because they think they can do it faster, but if we weren't doing, if we didn't have fast track, all those people would be applying through here anyway, wouldn't they?
Yes,
and then we'd have that a lot more stuff happening actually here.
I would say yes and no. I think that fast track has enabled some of these large scale developments to probably get off the ground a lot quicker than maybe they normally would have. But at some point they would have come through the normal process, the RMA process.
Thank you.
Well, I think the possibility of it finishing means that they've done it all at once, which is where the pressures come.
Yeah.
So I think just checking, Richard, you said the consultant's fee is high because of that. That balances up the income.
It's the overall expenditure and revenue. There's an equivalent over budget in both of those.
Given that the RMA changes, are we being naive to put just 22 in there for training staff?
22 FTE?
No, 22,000. But I mean, you know, courses, conferences and training, given that there's going to be significant reform.
I think that probably sits about right from my perspective. There's a lot of very clever people in our team, so we can actually hold that training internally.
Yeah.
So we don't have to on charge that externally.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I'd probably say the same about the legal costs though. If we all know what happens when they change the law.
Good questions. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. Next in line, we will have checking that all these consents are being adhered to. Simon, thanks, Simon.
And before Simon speaks, I'm just going to acknowledge Simon has been officially appointed into the compliance manager role. So he had been in an acting role, and as of a few weeks, he is now our official compliance manager. So just before he spoke, I wanted to embarrass him horrifically.
Thank you, Jo, and thank you, councillors. So I'm here representing the compliance team today. The compliance team are responsible for monitoring both regional and national rules under the RMA. What that looks like in practice is monitoring a mix of resource consents and permitted activities. We have a 24/7 pollution hotline, which is staffed during the day by 4 full-time staff. That's during normal business hours, and then outside of that, an on-call roster spread throughout the team and with staff from outside the compliance team. We undertake investigations and enforcement, and that pollution response and investigation and enforcement forms the reactive part of our role, because it's the investigations happen based on what's going on out in the community. Then we have our proactive monitoring, which is our auditing of consents and desktop monitoring and our checking of permitted activities. There's a component of that which is straight going out and undertaking monitoring, and then there's a component of that which is education. That can be everything from workshops to toolbox sessions to individual consent holder advice. The team maintains the HALE database, which is our register of contaminated land. We have a line there around business improvement, which is reacting to the ever-changing national rules and driving efficiency within the team. Many of the team's activities are mandatory, but there are discretions there around levels of service and how we do the job. Compliance team is partially fee funded. You'll see from the numbers there that is 22% of our overall budget. And I also wanted to call out that we have a separate workshop, I think, next week on fees and charges to go into detail there. We have 27.5 staff spread between 6 offices throughout Otago, and the team's operating budget is $5.2 million.
Then Hillary.
One of the efficiencies, and I don't know if it's in the new act, but they were certainly on the Building Act, they were looking at using photographic evidence for compliance and it being sent in. I'm not quite sure if some of that red tape stuff actually got through to legislation. Have we ever looked at a self-compliance network on some of the lower risk matters?
So I won't comment on the Building Act piece, but I think I would describe that as our performance monitoring work, where resource consents require things to be sent in, and we desktop assess those and then use that to help risk assess whether we're going to go out and do a more expensive field audit. So I think we have that in place, but it's very much differs between different consents depending on the activity they're undertaking.
So water, the one I was thinking about was water monitoring and having your the monitor tested for compliance, but actually I see little merit in people turning up to have a look at the pump in the shed necessarily if you've got the certification saying that it's been aligned.
Yeah,
What's
so
that?
That's actually something we've worked on within this financial year, so in the last 30 days. So
I'm glad we're on par there.
Yeah, you're very on trend. So as part of the water metering performance monitoring compliance, as part of that work, we assess whether people have had their verifications of meters and whether they're adhering to their consent conditions in terms of rates and volumes. If they are, we're doing bulk performance grading at the moment to enable them to get a quicker performance monitoring grading, and then that helps with the compliance team's prioritisation in terms of turning up on site for those people. So it's been something we're working through.
And a cost saver potentially.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. No, that's great. Thank you.
I was just going to add there, it's definitely a good example where we we have 1,600 water take consents-ish, and we desktop monitor all of them every year, but then physically audit very few of them because that desktop monitoring is so thorough and the data is good and it tells us where we need to go.
Hopefully it gives us better. Yeah.
The incident response people looks to me like that's, did you say 7 people or whatever, and that it's monitored?
So incidents and investigations, the full-time team is 7. Roughly 4 of those are on pollution response, 2 of those are on investigations, and then we have a team leader. But then they're backed up by the wider team in terms of that roster.
Right. And are they our people, or are they consultants, or are they what's?
So we have 7 full-time staff. There is a consultant.
Where does the consultants fit in?
Yeah, so the consultant line is in there around engaging technical expertise where we have a burden to prove environmental effect. So where we need expertise, we will often engage our science team, but it's where we need that external. And as an example for that one, case law currently says that if you're taking action around a wetland, you need 4 separate experts to prove that it's a wetland before you can take the action. So it's that kind of thing.
We don't do a lot of those.
No.
It was an example. I've got a different one.
It wasn't a good example.
It is. Yeah. The burden of proof for enforcement action, you can appreciate, is very high. It's court standards. So where we choose to, and there's been a lot of examples of cases that have ended up in court over the last 18 months. Joe emails you about those regularly. All of those require both legal and technical input off the back of the preliminary work that's undertaken by staff. It's just the nature of it. What I would say is if we there is a very robust process the team have got in place to determine when we take it to that next level, because there is a significant cost commitment at that time. But we also need to make sure that we are fulfilling our responsibilities in terms of that environmental component.
How much traffic do we get through the hotline?
I believe last year was around 1,400 calls relating to just under 1,000 individual incidents.
And is that going up or going down, or are they big, or are they small? You know what?
The numbers are actually dropping slightly, but I describe it as static rather than a meaningful trend. And the calls can vary. Some of them are very big. Some of them can be small. We get a lot of traffic around things like burning because it's very obvious. So we can get multiple calls about the same fire.
Simon, Alex, a joint question here. With the new acts coming into place, there appears that there will be a shift to have far more permitted activities, which will which should result in less consents for a lot of activities. But then I would assume that because of that, we will need to be monitoring those permitted activities. So do you see a balance? And that might be a question right in the middle of the
Did you see me reaching?
So have you been doing some
Yeah, so that will,
acts and what your thoughts are on that?
yeah, so with the select committee bill, we have more insights now into what that legislation will likely look like, and then what the team is working on at the moment, and there'll be a workshop in August, is around what that actually looks like in practice, and then we will need to consider how we change what we do. But yes, there will be less consents, but those that the team process will be more complex because they've kind of shifted the bar higher. So you might have less pure numbers, but what you're dealing with is complex, and then there'll be more permitted with notice and more permitted monitoring things. So we'll need to consider who does what and what that looks like, but that's an ongoing process for us. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? Robbie.
If someone does receive a fine for pollution or consent non-compliance, where would that fine show up in these budgets?
So the fine you would see under the incident response and enforcement budget, there's a fees and charges line there, would show up in that line.
How much of that line then is fines and how much is something else?
So I don't have a breakdown with me for that, I'm sorry. The fines are, relatively speaking, we would do around 40 fines a year, and under the old legislation you were probably looking at closer to $600 to $800 under those, so around 30 to 40, but I can get you a breakdown of that.
Is that the fine, or is that the, as in court imposed, or is that the one that we give people the option to pay before they go to court?
No, so that full budget line is fines. It is cost recovery where someone has agreed to fund the cost of an investigation, which happens sometimes, or it is court costs and court fines as well. So that's the full 94. I don't have a detailed breakdown of which bit is what.
Thank you.
You, Simon. Congratulations on successfully obtaining the full role. Well done. And now we'll go to environmental data, environmental delivery data and systems.
Yes, I'm back. Okay. The environmental delivery data and systems team has 4 core functions. The first is compliance monitoring data and reporting. The second is compliance biosecurity administration. Third, procurement and business support. And then the fourth is the implementation, reporting and support of regulatory platforms, Aquarius, Acela and NextGen. Together, these functions provide the operational services to enable consents, compliance and environmental implementation teams to effectively deliver their work programs. The team's work is primarily driven by the Resource Management Act, Fast Track Approvals Act, Biosecurity Act, council approved work programs and the operational requirements of the environmental delivery teams. Mandatory activities include the compliance, performance monitoring and procurement services, while administration and upkeep of regulatory platforms both support mandatory services. This work is important to the community because it enables council to effectively manage environmental information, monitor regulatory compliance, support decision-making and deliver efficient services. Our key service level is that 90% of performance monitoring returns are completed each year. The team has 21 FTE and an operating budget of approximately 3.6 million, with 23% funded through fees and charges and 77% funded through general rates. The team's work supports ORC's strategic direction, particularly the environment and community outcomes, by providing the information, technology, and business functions needed to implement regulation, support environmental management, and provide accessible information to community and stakeholders. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Any questions? If your team had a blank piece of paper and said we could do with a change in system, or here's something that would make that whole process better, is there something that is, or are you comfortable where we're at the moment?
I think the first thing I would point to would be our regulatory platform, so Aquarius, Acela and NextGen, and so there's a massive project at the moment obviously with NextGen, so I think that will create what we're trying to deliver within that group, which is information that's easily accessible for the internal teams, but also a part of that is providing that information in an accessible way externally. So I think that would be the one thing I would put on that piece of paper.
Just flagging that we have indicated there'll be a briefing on that platform, that project for councillors. We've just been waiting for it to get to a point where we can show you some of that system and talk about how particularly it will change the experience. Obviously, we want a great experience for our staff, particularly for the customers that are interacting with us in consent processes. So we're not far off getting to that point.
Good. Thank you. Kate?
Thank you. I think you in part just answered my question. So if the science data, if somebody goes and finds a wetland and he puts it in the system, you'll be having a system of environmental data that people will be able to see that because they can't at the moment. Is that how it's going to work? So the value of that will come back to the community.
So this specific team deals with regulatory data.
Right.
So that's data coming in from myself in consents, Simon's compliance team and Libby's biosecurity team. That's probably more of a science question this afternoon, or EM this afternoon, relating to that kind of wetland.
So the question, I suppose the question is there going to be, is there a system that the data over a number of platforms will be?
Yeah, it's our GIS, it's our Targo Maps is where we pull together the various pieces of data that need to be publicly accessible. So things like, wetland identification, where we've granted consents, all of those things sit in the public platform, and that spatially is the direction that everything's going now.
No, that's great.
Just to spot that, they're moving towards a better internal system where staff will have more internal visibility of those things like wetlands, but GIS will still, and Targo Maps will still be the platform for sharing most of that information.
No, that's great, and I presume it's not a double handling of it. It will be an internalised, clever push a button. Thank you.
And will the wetland mapping have 4 different dots because we've got 4 different experts doing it? No, we won't. Andrew, your question.
No comment.
Sorry.
I've got a real question. With regards to consultants, just looking at the financials over the last couple of years, there's been a bit of a tapering off the use of consultants. Does that mean that our capability and capacity is where it should be, or is there another reason why that's occurred?
So for this team, we did have some consultant money and time in there for the delivery of the freshwater farm plan system. So there was going to be a nationalised platform, and we had to provide inputs and costs to fund that, plus then also setting up our own system for implementing those. And as those regulations have been paused, we've then reduced the budget that supports that.
Thank you.
Further questions? Excellent. Really look forward to the NextGen workshop. And we've got something quite special to show us, no doubt. So moving on. So there was a headwind coming up the harbour and didn't quite get here by 9 o'clock. But next is Harbour Master Pete.
Harbour Master Pete isn't going to do the intro. I will. So our Harbour Master team is a team of 3 FTE, and they cover the coastal Otago area, but also the Lake Dunstan as well. So we have transferred our responsibilities for the Harbour Master function for QLDC's area to QLDC, and they deliver that service. We have 2 boats. We are based at Halsey Street in Dunedin. We maintain strong relationships with the port and also a number of coastal water users. We have a role in implementing our navigational safety bylaws, which have just recently been approved by Council. We do a lot of work around navigational buoys and safety signs across the region. We maintain a port and marine harbour safety code. We do some monitoring work for our environmental monitoring team, and we're helping them with that, especially through in the Central Otago Lakes. And we also carry out public engagement and awareness events across the region. And Pete and I are happy to take questions where we can, and just apologies from Steve that he's not here, he's in Wellington.
Questions? We're all happy with the harbour and the Harbour Master activities. No questions? Yeah, Andrew.
Got to think of one. No, seriously, just looking at the key work, and it talks about the water safety campaign. I'm just wondering what percentage of your overall work is involved in that educational space.
It depends. We do a lot of work over the summer period with recreational boating and on the water and off the water, lakes, etc. To put a time on it would be quite hard because it's ongoing. It's our BAU day-to-day business.
Yeah, so it is concentrated over the summer period, and the team is out on the water, say through in Central Otago on the key lakes that are used on those peak periods to ensure compliance with the relevant rules. And they do go to some of the strategic council events, so or events like Moana and Nui, and then there's also the face-to-face engagement with water users and groups as well. But not something that we would have a percentage of time at the moment, but something that we can talk to Steve about and look into.
Yeah, I suppose why I asked the question, it's obviously about prevention, and I thought, well, is and I'm not telling you guys what to do or how to do it, but is there a way to at the front end do more of the education, which means that you have less of the non-compliance and safety issues?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Just a general question, you guys, from a compliance point of view at Harbour Master and being the front of the organisation in many places, just checking that you have the health and safety budget's adequate, so, and for training as well for those situations that are a bit difficult for some of your staff and your team. I noticed no line that just says health and safety, but I presume there's adequate funding in there for.
Pete, do you want to? No, I'll take it. No, it's all right. Yeah.
Specific to Harbour Master, but all the whole compliance and enforcement side of things.
Yeah, ensuring that our team are appropriately trained and have the support that they need. So there is money in our budgets, but there's also money within Tammy's area as well that looks at those core health and safety training and what is provided to our team across the board, and that is sized to what the role is and the risks that those staff members could be faced when they're out in the field. So in terms of feeling like they're adequately trained and supported, yes, and the budget is there to enable that to happen.
Right. Okay.
The navigation safety bylaw or whatever, it's in place now. And has the person who caused the consternation because he didn't shift often enough, are they unhappy, or is it all working well because everybody else?
Can we just not talk about a specific case in a public meeting, but maybe generically you can talk about how that rule's being applied, Pete?
Yes. Sorry, I was just, yes.
We haven't had any negative feedback about the bylaw coming in, no.
And no positive, just no feedback.
Positive feedback.
Positive feedback about a bylaw.
That would be awesome, and we do often get it. I think, we're only a couple months into implementing the new bylaw, so I think at this stage it's hard to see either way where it's sitting. But in terms of those, there was a lot that was kept from the original bylaw, so for a lot of people it will be status quo, but there were some changes, and we will be keeping an eye in terms of our interactions with people on the water, especially over summer, and if we are needing to undertake anything beyond more education-focused conversations, you would then see that come through in our reporting.
Is it I take it seasonal?
Some of it is, but we're out on the water all the time, and that bylaw applies all year round.
Right.
It's been a pleasure to be out with the team doing the coastal opportunities and issues paper, and one of my regrets has been that one of you guys haven't been able to be out there, because it's been really good discussion about the safety issues, especially around the Catlins and Balgluttha, Punawea, and then requiring to access beaches because they are the only safe place, especially for children, to access. The feedback I've got from that, it's been really quite interesting to see that people want the coast activated, but how that is done and the knowledge to get what is safe and what is not good practice, like driving over cockles, has been really, really interesting. And I'm wondering, is there any capacity, or would we have to fund more to ensure that we can activate that space in a safe and in a safe way? And also the question about working with existing structures and things to ensure that they remain safe, but isn't a huge burden to keep them safe, because and I don't know if that's a harbour. It sort of comes into the safety and access part, but I'm not quite sure that we've got it that wide.
There's a little bit in that. So we do and go down to some of those coastal areas in Catlins Way, and we put the drone up, and there is work that is done at the bar with the crossing and providing public advice and information around safe timings to cross bars. So there is that general overlay of public safety when you are undertaking those activities, but then also location specific advice. And I'll get Pete to talk about what we have done in those areas. It is a team of 3, and we have a lot of work. And as with anything, as an organisation, if we look to do more, we will look at how we can support that and reprioritise where we can. But if you are looking at significant changes to work programs, then that would then result in us having to look at how we resource this one specific team.
Yeah, thanks.
So the questions.
I think Peter was asked.
Oh, you go, Peter.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, so after a fatality down in the Owaka Bar, we were running bar crossing evenings in Dunedin. So we reached out to the Catlins area, and they were more than happy for us to come down. And so we've run 2 bar crossing evenings just to raise awareness of issues around bars, that they are dangerous. And the same would apply to beach launching, like your
Karitani, I think.
Yeah, the Karitani as well. We're looking at reaching out to Karitani as well this year as well.
Yeah. I suppose and I really appreciate that, and I was aware of that, and it's been really well supported in the community. I think that that is an obvious safety area, but there are other safer sites to actually launch from potentially that we possibly don't promote, and it's that balance. And I'm only highlighting it today because I think there's a really good.
Yeah, it's a broader beach bylaw issue which are actually administered by the TA. So there's some coordination we will have to do with them if we're looking at the sort of combination of navigational safety and the use of those beach spaces. It's come up forever, this issue, and beach bylaws, and particularly vehicles on beaches, is a very, very divisive topic. It's probably the best way I'd describe it. So understand the issue, Kate, and it's probably what. And I know there's many of you that have been to more of the coast engagement sessions than I have, but even the one that I attended over the weekend was, it is very clear that many of the issues coming up cross both the responsibilities of the TAs and responsibilities of ORC. So as we sort of unpick that feedback, there will be quite a large bucket of issues that we're going to have to consider how we pick up with our coastal TAs.
Yeah, and I suppose the reason I'm asking these questions is to highlight that there may be some funding, or I'm just checking whether it's a harbour master role or something else. Thank you.
Excellent. There are no further questions. We are now going to break early and to 10:30. But Joe, to your team, Libby, Alex, Simon and Pete, thanks very much for what you provided, and we will come back to you with some summaries of bits and pieces that we're all on the same wavelength and look forward to progressing the long-term plan. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We're back underway and still online. We have Neil and Gretchen. Good to have you here. Everyone else is bored. Andrew won't be a tick. No panic. We understood. Right. Mr. Dyer, your team and science. The floor is yours, sir.
Thanks very much. So in terms of a quick overview, Science and Resilience portfolio is made up of our science team, our EM team, our hazards team, engineering and civil defence. What I just quickly open with is a couple of little points about those elements. Broadly, all of our activity areas are predominantly general rate funded. We do have some elements of targeted rates and other bits and pieces within there. Note engineering as the main exception. Most other activity areas are general rate funded. On occasion, we pull in funding from the outside world as well for whether that be science programs. Sometimes we support and fund joint programs within managed by other entities, and on occasion we do the same on their behalf. And so we have funding going both ways in that regard. We also, you'll note through our budgets recently, have been the beneficiaries of significant amounts of central government funding with regard to infrastructure development. The other key point to note is that our teams work closely with many other teams across the organisation. Our science and hazards teams provide a huge amount of planning advice or advice that informs planning processes. They support a range of community activities, catchment action plan development, all of that sort of thing. So we're regularly engaged with programs that are run by primarily by teams across the rest of the business. That does take up a good chunk of our staff resourcing time. Equally within teams as well, we have our Eve here from the environmental monitoring team as well as a huge level of support that he provides to other teams. A lot of the work program provided by Eve's team, or provided for by Eve's team, is dictated or outlined by science programs or by hazards programs, or indeed engineering. But I'll leave it at that in terms of an overview and hand over to Ben to get into the science work. Actually, just before I do, Jean-Luc is intending to be here. He's presenting at a couple of national meetings at the moment, so he should be here around 11 and we should be able to fit him in, but there might be a bit of jostling. I'll just describe that as it plays out.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ben.
Morning. Hello again. So I've just got a bit of a context setter for the science program at FESL, sort of describe where we're at. The primary role of science is to develop and provide the information based to support decision-making relating to environmental management across the ORC. This includes for consent, policy, action plan development, and also to support external groups such as catchment groups and industry. Developing this information includes setting up and maintaining monitoring networks such as the SOE network and targeted studies at particular issues. We do a lot of technical review and advice for other ORC teams such as consents, compliance, and more latterly the ICM and CAP program, and providing strategic advice to folks of strategy. Also a lot for community groups and their advisors, and more latterly quite a bit of involvement in the fast track process. Periodic efforts to provide technical advice for policy development. Big ones recently have been the Land and Water Plan and Air Plan, and currently the focus is supporting the Coast Plan development. The team is made up of 16 scientists, including a principal scientist, Jason, who was in yesterday, a number of team leaders and support staff for a total of 22 FTE. We spread a range of subjects, which you're probably pretty familiar with. The current funding structure is split across three buckets, namely air, biodiversity, and land and water is the dominant one there. I just note we have a very close working relationship with environmental monitoring, led by Eve. They do a lot of the field work and data collection, which we rely on. The wider context is a bit of a team in transition, anticipating RMA reform and change in national direction. We're using this opportunity to do a bit of a science program review and a refocus ahead of the LTP. The workshop we had with you a few weeks ago, sort of the start of that. But we're trying to actively position for the legislative change when that arrives. But currently, we're basically still running under the RMA or RMA kind of system. It's noted that science program review is underway, and we're really looking to take the program back to the studs and refocus on council priorities and retain flexibility for new changes in national direction. There's a few challenges with the current legislation. Defining mandatory and non-mandatory isn't always black and white. The direction gives it broad mandates, but not a lot of detail. Looking at the table and discussing it, the table we provided and discussing it with the team, we'd probably turn the dial on some of those classifications and recalibrate a bit with a bit of further thinking. The sort of local policy context, the pause on policy development has affected some of the work that was planned under the LTP, such as the air plan review support and development of scroll plane management plans and a network review against the land and water plan. We haven't that sort of pause, that vacuum was quickly filled by increased demand for support for science advice for non-regulatory catchment groups and landowners. And particularly, we have a lot of requests for advice on wetland protection, fish habitat, water quality, and general education. Also making quite an effort to repackage the information that was developed to support the land and water plan process. And we get a lot of requests for this kind of information, such as maps and data sets. Also following from the land and water plan process, we're having quite a concerted effort to undertake collaborative work with industry, notably with beef and lamb on an alternative winter grazing work, and we're getting looking further into forestry, hydrology, and practice with the forestry industry. I'll just note the projects listed here is a selection of what we're up to, but it's not an exhaustive list of the science team activities. So happy to take any questions.
Hilary. Kate.
I don't get a feeling which I would like to, from the projects, what they are they part of the way through? Are they 1 year through a 3-year project? Are they about to finish? What are they? How much are they worth? Are they half of our total spend? Are they, I'd like to know more about them.
I think we undertook at the workshop to provide that, so we're happy to do get that sort of.
Yeah, sorry, I think that was one that we were missing for. But if you've got the information if that information came to workshop, if you could just flick it through to me again.
No, it didn't come to a workshop, but a similar question to Kate's right back at the start, Hilary, in terms of how we'll be presenting that forward, as in what you need to consider in the LTP. We'll have that level of detail, which is, was one of the things that came out of that workshop to be delivered in those future stages.
I think you're right to ask the question, though, and just in terms of summarising this, there are a broad range of projects here. Some are establishment projects, and so there's significant levels of expenditure going into establishing sites. For instance, our groundwater network's a good example. Those are not ongoing costs. Once they're established, those networks will be continue to be monitored, but relatively low cost in terms of relative to what we've been spending at the moment. But there are also a series of projects in here that are ongoing as well. So take your point, and we'll make sure that's all crystal clear as we come through that science review.
Neil.
Thank you. Just wondering, with the fast track work that the science team are doing, I'm assuming that is recoverable. I know it's probably small fry in terms of the big picture, but we're pulling back all those costs that we put into that.
Yes, that's correct. There's charge codes for any comment we make on applications.
Cool, thank you.
Kate.
So it's so small that it doesn't show up on the circle. That's just got general rates in there. That wasn't my question.
Those numbers are based on budget.
Okay.
And yes, it's minor.
Yeah. This won't be a surprise question. citizen science and working with communities, and a wonderful example the other day with Oamaru and the air quality. My question really relates to, they're doing a project at school. Do they get even? Do they get you in, or how do they work that we give? We get the information, they do the work for us, and the data's collected in a way that can assist science. Is that how it's operating?
Yes, so that work is being done by a consultant who's have a pretty good instrument grade, so that will certainly be used for future science work.
And
so we consider wherever any work is occurring, we engage with communities as that work's being established, and consider the level of engagement and interest, and then try and tailor programs to include that type of work. The air example is a good one. There have been others too where there's been a high level of interest up front, and we've worked with communities in a little bit more of a collaborative way to collect data, or to ensure that data goes back to them.
Yeah, and that will be in the EDNA and other spaces potentially as well.
Yeah, there's a range of different areas, lots occurring in the biodiversity space, particularly at the moment.
Okay. You mentioned scroll planes, and sorry, I am interested in that because I work with the Apatariwai and with the ICM. Has that paused, or is it actually just an opportunity to sit down with the group and work out how they could manage that without the regulatory space? I'm just checking.
I think the plan development's paused. The actual legal status is quite subtle. I think I'm sure we'll explain it here, but scientists, wetland scientists, are still active in that area.
Yes, the science programs are ongoing. There has been still flurries of community interest in terms of developing a plan, but largely any plan development at the moment from a legal standpoint would need to be community developed. As that interest arises, or as there's any requirements from the community out there for us to provide any support, we're available and ready to go. Similarly, any long-term science programs that are still happening up there are still occurring.
And how much of this, the budget lines, maybe we're going to get into those, were predicated on potentially a decision that went the other way yesterday?
None. These are current budgets. Remember, we're looking at.
Yeah, sorry, that's okay.
That's the next stage of workshops.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Getting my years ahead of my years, or behind.
And Robbie.
Thanks for all this stuff. I was just thinking in context of the reform that's going on, and having TAs understand the nature of the work and the locations of it. And I can see most of this is happening across all the different areas, but there is some specific stuff that's, just in a certain area and that sort of carry on. I just wonder if there's any value in this, the spreadsheet where it kind of goes, the tick box for a CDC, CODC sort of stuff.
So a good question, Matt. And I've just got a piece of work from Andrea to review as part of our inputs into the reform conversations, which will be shared with everyone, which is all of our functions in a rough split. We've looked at both financial models supported by Nick's team, but also the managers feeding into their understanding of where our work applies regionally versus by TA. So that'll just give a really good overlay for all of you, but also I'll share that with the mayors and CEs to pass on.
Thank you.
And Robbie.
The air science program, air emissions inventory for 2 towns. What 2 towns is that?
It's split over 2 financial years. There's 4 towns. We're doing a couple were done last year and a couple were coming up this year. I'm struggling to name them. I think includes Wanaka, Milton, Dalpalooza, and possibly others.
And those emissions are they particulate sort of emissions or CO2 emissions?
No, it's trying to get a gauge on the PM10, the sort of smoke emissions and where they're coming from.
Yeah. In the budget, the personnel costs and internal charges overheads are blank. Is that sort of settled at a wash up, or?
I can speak to that if that's helpful. There's a few ORC teams that have just 1 or 2 staff members in that team. So to itemise the personnel costs for that 1 or 2 people, becomes a privacy issue in terms of publishing their salary details. So there's just a few teams where we've grayed that out, but we can, I guess, provide higher level detail around the personnel costs. Oh, and it rolls up into the top. Yes.
Captured in the bottom one.
Yeah, correct.
So you can sort of reverse engineer it if you want to.
Yeah, so we certainly will be sharing that, the overall personnel costs within that entire activity. But as we're just got to be careful when we start breaking it down into those sub activities where we might only have one staff member or two staff members. But no intent to not share that overall cost. It's just how granular we can go with certain information in a public space.
Yeah, and I'll just note as well the sundry expenses for land and water science monitoring. That there's a large line, like Kelly was saying earlier. It's hard to get a gauge on.
Yeah, again, when we do the activities as we go into the long-term plan, those will be, and if we just go back to the comment I made on catchment communities, where comes under sundries, when we do that activity line in our long-term plan, that will be costed out the side. Will be shown there, but it'll still on the main spreadsheet will be still under sundries.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll see that with each activity. Yep.
Sorry, thanks.
Further questions? Ben, your review that you're doing, and listening to the comments that we had from our previous, from environmental delivery, was around ensuring that what we are doing is heading towards our strategic goals and what we're trying to have as an outcome in our environmental outcomes or our organisational outcomes. So is that the lens you're looking at as you're doing this review of your science program?
Essentially, yes, yeah. We're sort of trying to move from the mindset of monitoring trends and reporting to identifying priorities, trying to work out where we can best and invest for outcomes, and particularly looking at what's worked. So yeah, we'll definitely be able to pivot towards those strategic directions.
Thank you. Further questions? Yep, Alan.
Yeah, what sort of things are the capital spends in biodiversity section?
So the biodiversity is a relatively recent program. A lot of it is monitoring gear. For example, there's a program monitoring rare wetland birds. They have acoustic monitoring devices scattered all around the region that try and pick up certain birds. So it's monitoring gear like that.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. And now we'll move on to environmental monitoring. Eve.
Thank you. Good morning. So environmental monitoring, we are tasked with maintaining and monitoring the water quality and quantity, air quality, biodiversity. Our team pretty much monitors anything in the environmental space that is legislated or is supporting mandatory work. So we have a large number of monitoring stations across Otago. In the air quality space, we currently have, sorry, I'm just going to get the right number. We currently have 10, 11 sites around Otago. Some of them are permanent. We have 2 trailer sites currently in Oamaru and Balclutha. So they're collecting some information that we haven't collected in those spaces for a little while. Ben mentioned the spatial monitoring that's occurring around different centres. So that is ongoing this year as well, and that is basically to support that wider air quality work. In the land and water space, we are largely mandated by the State of Environment monitoring for water quantity and water quality, but we also maintain sites for flood monitoring, which is a fairly important part of our work, low flow monitoring for water quantity sites where they have a water allocation limit on them. Currently, we have 79 flow sites throughout Otago, and it's quite a large number of sites to maintain accurately across the region. And that's covering everything from Upper Clutha right through to Dunedin Urban, Catlins, North Otago, so quite a large spread of sites in there. In addition to that, we have a lot of groundwater sites. So Ben also mentioned that the groundwater monitoring network has substantially increased in the last 2 or 3 years. So we've gone up to around 110 groundwater sites across the region. So that has been quite a significant change in that monitoring. In addition to that, I already mentioned that we're doing water quality monitoring across those similar sites. We've got 112 surface water quality sites, 105 groundwater quality sites. We also take on additional programs during the summer. So with Contact Recreation, which for last year was 20 sites. We do the CARP program, the ecological strips program, electric fishing program. So they're all in addition to our business as usual work that occurs all year. So additional programs in there. Biodiversity. So the biodiversity program has really taken off in the environmental monitoring space in the last year or so, last 18 months. We've had a bit of an injection of programs that have been kicked off out of science, and we are carrying a couple of extra FTEs currently to work in this space when this work was previously being carried out by consultants. So hopefully that's making some savings along the way. Our budget is general rates, and so that is around just over $6 million annually, and that supports essentially a monitoring network that covers close to 500 parameters. Many of those are brought in real time, so they are real-time information coming through our systems. Our FTE count is currently 29. We are budgeted for 29. As I mentioned, we do have a couple of extras in the system at the moment for some specific biodiversity programs that we're carrying out. Anything else? It's pretty quick summary, but any questions?
Kate. How much of that data is available publicly, either immediately or by delay?
Pretty much all of it is real-time data, aside from water quality data. So anything that's not being monitored as a telemetry system, so if it's a telemetered site, that is near real-time data. So
and available on the portal.
And available on the portal. Yeah.
Great, and that also allows people to download that information if they want to.
You can download information if you'd like to, as long as it is ORC owned data.
Yeah.
The team also provide a really responsive service for people who are requesting data in kind of different ways, or different subsets of data. We regularly processing.
And sell it to them, presumably.
No,
The processing of data, we charge for that?
No, we pick it up. If the request is reasonable, we pick it up, package it up, and send it out to them. If they were asking for significant processing, we might consider that through the science team, working out whether or not we've got it already. But for the most part, we try and indulge those requests and make sure that people have got what they need to make a decision.
Rory.
This sort of showed me partly how sort of difficult it is to try and decide the mandatory and non-mandatory sort of things. It isn't quite the split that we might imagine, or to put it another way, these things like it's mandatory that we do monitoring. That doesn't mean the amount of monitoring we do is mandatory. So to me to have some better understanding of, for example, at the level of what most like Canterbury Environment what most regional councils are doing. Are we doing a similar amount to what they're doing? Are we doing what the government might expect? Are we doing a Rolls-Royce version? Are we doing a barely adequate version? Because like yesterday we had discussions about the possibility of putting into the long-term plan increased monitoring in the lakes. Is that because we're not doing what the government might expect us to? Or, you know, where does it fit in with just saying mandatory sort of or not doesn't quite help me understand where we fit.
All the regional councils struggle with this question, and there's quite a good network of sort of collaboration between the different regional councils to essentially build up a best practice across the country. There'll be different subgroups or subject groups get together and try and interpret the legislation to work out what's required at that level. But you're correct, it says monitor, but whether that's dipping a beaker in or installing a lake buoy is where the discretion is. And we're trying to target that to the importance of the issue.
So if we could just understand more of the background about that would be useful to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this type of forum to get into that detail would be what it is unachievable in a kind of 20 or 15 minute period. But by the same token, that's what that science review is designed to do, is to give you a look right under the hood, give you a sense of that the discretion that sits within each of those mandatory categories, and give you the ability to give us a steer on where you think that needs to go. At the same time, as we do that, to provide reference, I totally get that you'd need some reference points to be able to give a good steer, and those reference points could be, what are our neighbours doing, what does the government actually expect? Have they provided guidance on this, and are we meeting that or not? All of those kind of factors.
Special area.
Correct.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd add in this space is you really need to consider the question about what our community is asking us to deliver. This is an area where we get significant pressure in a positive way from the community to provide data to help them with their management of their own farming or industry or water quality projects, if you're talking schools and other things. So while we are very cognizant of government requirements, and that is really critical, I know through my conversations there is also a huge community appetite for this data, whether it be flood management and response, just management of water takes in rural areas. So there is that element of it too, and it is a very this program, the environmental monitoring program, is heavily relied on by a much wider range of people than I appreciated before I sort of became aware of it. So it's a good question to ask, Hilary, and understanding the mandatory statutory piece, and then having a really good understanding too around all of the ways in which our community are using this data, and sort of, I suppose, how much more of an appetite there is even for what we're doing currently, but we just haven't been able to provide everything that we're being asked for.
Yes, well, part of that to me is that we, for good reason or bad, imagine that we are representatives of the community. So we are the way of speaking. We were chosen to represent the community. So it's where that fits in. When you hear information from the community, it would be useful for that to come back to us saying we're hearing that, rather than you telling us what the community wants us to do, because we sort of think we're the representatives. So if it can go back through that loop somehow.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that loop is regularly used. A good example would be if you look at the Manahirikea River versus the Taieri River, similar levels of irrigation and abstraction to the Manahirikea. But in terms of our monitoring networks, because of that public interest and the level of interest from the community there over time, has about 3 times the density of monitoring to the Taieri. And so in terms of investment at a high level, that's a significant difference in cost per population or cost per water user. But all of those things have been based on community interest, community feedback over time. And that feedback loop you've described. The opportunity we get through the review process is to dig into a bit of that, and if it would be good through that next science program review workshop to work through what that feedback looks like in practice, and agree something that's going to work for councillors.
Just wondering if there's, with the changes from NIWA and Earth Sciences New Zealand, as to the lack of action from them relevant to our region, or opportunities that come for us to step into gaps that have been created, or work together better.
Yeah, Eve can speak to this one well. He's spent quite a bit of time recently reviewing the current costs of servicing for sites because we pay Earth Sciences in a lot of cases for the sites that they manage. They pay us for some of the sites that we manage on their behalf. We have cost sharing agreements, but Eve can give you a bit more.
So interestingly, they have walked away from their water quality commitments, and so we've already over the last probably 5 or 6 years picked those up on behalf of them. So they have been integrated into our network in the interest of keeping the information going because of the historical information that's sitting there. It's also relevant to our network. Additionally, as Tom's mentioned, we are paying for a data sharing agreement. So we share, there's about 3 sites that we share with them currently, but that costs us approximately, I think, $50,000 a year to share those sites with them 50/50. I have recently tried to take a site over that they are maintaining on our behalf, but they are not really in a position financially to be handing over some of their sites. So still keeping a process going though of discussing that with them to try and reduce costs.
Yeah, so I guess what you can take from that is our networks have been integrated from day dot. Broadly, the NIWA and the Earth Sciences New Zealand have been reducing their footprint where appropriate or required for our wider monitoring programs. We pick that up over time. But there are ongoing discussions around cost efficiency, cost effectiveness.
But from a budgeting point of view for 26, 27, you're pretty aware of what they can and can't do. So you're pretty stable.
There's not much more they can drop. And if they that isn't already bound up by some level of agreement. But if they chose to as well, because we pay for servicing of those sites in a lot of cases, if they chose to exit, my sense is we'd be in a better position to deliver the same work more efficiently.
Thank you.
Further questions? Probably just under environmental monitoring and biodiversity biosecurity. I'm just wondering where these costs lie under removal of salmonid species from priority catchments to protect our native glaciid populations. And I'm probably saying who's paying for that, and are the people that look after the salmonids contributing towards that cost?
So the numbers you see in here, that's general rate funded, but there is a lot of partnership work going on with Fish and Game, with landowners and others. There have been a couple of glaciid sanctuaries set up on farm where farmers have expressed that they want to explore that, and as a part of their environmental initiatives. But that is occurred in partnership. We've provided some support resource to help them get on with that work. Equally, there's been a couple of other sites where populations of threatened species have been surveyed. It's been determined that there's an opportunity there to protect those populations by establishing fish barriers. That work is occurring in partnership with Fish and Game, DOC, and other parties as and when we can. We do we do a fair chunk of the actual fish removal itself in the field, but a lot of the other work is done by others.
Thanks, Tom. Further questions? Thank you. If John Luke is not here.
He is online now.
Is it online?
Just in time, yeah.
John Luke, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Just first thing, can you hear me?
We can.
Good, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't be in person. Just take a few minutes to give an overview of the natural hazard activities that we usually do. So there are basically three core activities. One is making sure we understand natural hazards, where they are, how bad they can be in the region. And that's kind of a problem definition function. The other activity is about supporting and collaborating with other teams and organizations to inform decision-making around natural hazards, whether it is natural hazard mitigation, adaptation decisions, or just general public decision around a property, for example. So it's a lot of that activity is a lot about supporting other teams, the engineering team in terms of management of the flood protection scheme, the policy and planning team to inform good land use planning, supporting civil defense. It's a really core link between the two teams. And externally to ORC, it's about supporting territorial authorities in their planning decisions, and at a wider scale, supporting communities and the general public on natural hazard matters, whether it's providing information or helping define what can be done to manage or mitigate a hazard. And the last activity is really a very operational one. It is to operate a flood warning service. And again, this service benefit ORC internal groups and decision making. We help the engineering team make decisions around operation of schemes. We help civil defense get ready to respond, but also the general public by providing expected consequence of a heavy rainfall event, for example. So in the document you have in front of you, you've got a few examples of those projects that support those activities. If we go to the first type of activity, so the assessment of natural hazards, the regional LiDAR is a really good example of a project that will support this. It's a data capture project, but it is a very important type of data. It's one of the most important data set that we use because it informs all the flood hazard assessment we do, most of the geotechnical assessments also. The other example part of that first type of activity is, you heard about that yesterday, it's a natural hazard prioritization work. That's to get really a very comprehensive way at planning for natural hazards in terms of work plans. Example of the second type of activity, the collaboration and support. We operate a natural hazard database portal that's available publicly, so anyone can access this portal and have access to all the natural hazard information, maps, reports, photos that we've produced in the last 15, 20 years, and sometimes even older than that. That's a key tool for us to make sure the information that we have is shared with other groups. We also support that by being available to explain what this hazard information is about. We respond to many public inquiries around natural hazard. I think last financial year, we responded to about just over 180 inquiries related to natural hazard. So we're also available to go to community events or organize community events around natural hazard or support the civil defense team when they do this. We also support regional planning, and the plan is to support the potential changes coming with the resource management reform. There'll be a piece of work around understanding constraint in the region, and natural hazard are one of the constraints. A very important example of that collaboration is with civil defense. We support civil defense technically in terms of scoping and assessing natural hazard that is needed for the civil defense team to plan, whether it's planning outside of an event or during an event. Example of supporting territorial authorities. You're very aware of the South Dunedin Future Programme. That's a really good example of the ORC support. So the natural hazard role is, team role is to provide the technical assessment around natural hazards and change to the physical environment that could impact natural hazards. We're still working with CODC, Central Otago, on Tiviot Valley flood debris flow hazard, and part of the result of that work can be used to inform land use planning decision now and in the future. And finally, an example of the flood warning service is we operate a 24-hour, 7 days flood roster. So there's always someone on call tasked with keeping an eye on the weather, being in close contact with Met Service, and taking this information and turning that information into useful, timely, robust information about consequence of that severe rainfall event, what this rain will do in terms of river levels, potential impact on people, building infrastructure. So really the overall purpose of the team is to support that one of the ORC strategic direction about resilience of communities and resilience of infrastructure. The budget is mainly general rate. We have grants mainly for LiDAR, support the LiDAR from MCERT, and we are a team of 10 people to deliver that work.
Excellent. Questions? It may be to Tom, but or it could be Jean-Luc. So when we're in the natural hazard space, what process have we got in place to decide when we are in and out of a project? So we've done the monitoring, the eyeing up the natural hazard, but then there's work to be done to protect communities and that. So what is that process? And do we need to refine that, or are you comfortable with it, I suppose? Yeah.
John, can answer that one, I think.
So the first step is really for us to understand the hazard, and we have different legislation requiring us to do this. The RMA have a section around understanding hazard and collecting information to the level that we need to undertake our function. The Civil Defence Act also have mention of the need to understand hazard and risk and manage hazard and risk. Now, there is no very specific guidance on when the regional council role stopped in relation versus the district or city council. The legislation usually refers to local authority, which mixing both regional council and territorial authority. But the way we're doing it for the moment is really taking a collaborative approach with the TAs. We most of the time really sit at a technical advisory role. We did that for the Dunedin City Council when the city was reviewing the district plan. We acted as a technical advisor. We're doing the same with Waitaki currently. However, there are areas where we start going into investigation around what can be done about a natural hazard. the boundary is not, like I said before, is not a really clear cut boundary defined, but it's really about making sure the district or the group that need to make a decision have enough to make that decision around future mitigation or management of natural hazard in general, whether it's by planning, control, or engineering work. A specific aspect of that is flood related. We have a more active role in a kind of investigating mitigation measures, and that's working with the engineering team around that. And that's why we do kind of initial design of mitigation that could support the engineering team, mainly related to flood schemes.
John, Luke, I'd probably, where I'm heading with that after, and if you were at council yesterday when we adopted our risk management framework, and that's just ensuring that where we get to in a project, I had my finger on it, didn't push it. Where we get to in a project that we are in fact having the right risk protections if we're getting into areas where we would normally go past. So that's probably where I'm heading with that, Tom.
Yep, no, it's good to know, and I think well, John answered that quite clearly. One other way to frame a bit of that would be, broadly speaking, if we still have a function where within the wider team, i.e., engineering, river management, or flood control, Jean-Luc's team tend to walk further down the road through investigations and other parts because they provide a supporting resource to Brett's team. And so good examples of that would be, there's a natural river management function with regard to the Glenorchy hazard investigation. There was massive overlap between TA functions and our functions up there. So we continued right through to an endpoint. There'd be other situations such as South Dunedin where we are still a partner, but taking less of a lead in terms of the infrastructure investigations, all of that sort of stuff. So it just depends on the context. It depends on who's responsible infrastructurally, who's responsible in terms of mitigations as to how far we go or how far we take it. Some of that can be a little bit fluid and can be negotiated on the basis of where the resource is housed and best outcomes for the community. But I take your point that there's certain risks there and certain elements we could manage a bit more clearly for the perspective of the council table and public as well.
Thank you. Chanel and then Andrew.
Hey, hi Jean-Luc, it's Chanel. Should we be expecting any capital bids from natural hazards, or I guess it is a general team question, or are natural hazards typically the operational planning?
Yeah, no, you're right. The team is really operational planning. We usually don't have capital expenditure. That the way we do our work program is we work, for example, with the engineering team. So our work program is really about investigation, data capture, but anything that will need some construction or equipment purchase will be done through the engineering work program, for example. We don't have capital work in general.
And so to answer your question more fully, no, wouldn't expect any capital bids from natural hazards specifically. We are working through developing options and responses to some of the challenges in the engineering space at the moment. But what I'd expect is that that's still broadly within a similar envelope to what you're seeing in current long-term planning.
And Andrew.
Just looking at the natural hazards budget for the 24 year and the 25 year, in relation to consultants, it bounced around a fair bit, what we anticipated and what the actuals were.
And I see in the current year, the 26-27, that's been rectified. So my question really is, why is it so difficult to predict? Is it just simply natural hazards? They don't worry about a financial year. They can pop up anytime.
John, do you want to go that one, or do you want me to answer it?
So just for me to understand the question, that about the consultant cost and why.
Yeah, just really, John, just really trying to understand. I think you've obviously resolved the problem with the current financial year, but the two previous years, what was budgeted for consultants and what the actuals were quite different. And I just wondered, was there a reason behind that, or not?
Yeah, there are various reasons for that. Sometime the split between what we can do in house and what we will need consultant support for is based on assumption, but actually when we start the work, that assumption is not always validated. So we end up doing more work in house, for example.
I can flesh that out a little bit. So broadly speaking, we've hired really well in the last little while. So we've had a capacity to be able to do a lot of work in-house that we would have otherwise, in most years, we would have put out to the market. So we've churned out a lot of bug modelling, a lot of other bits and pieces that we've been able to do with staff time and resources that are already available in-house, and therefore haven't needed to spend a great deal of consultant funds on doing that work. That creates massive up and downs year to year.
The significant jump from forecast is the acceleration of the LIDAR program too, and so you'll see the corresponding increase in other revenue fees and subsidies and grants above, which is the money coming in from MFE. So that's what's created a slight difference from what we'd forecast to spend when we set the budgets.
Thank you.
And so while I gave the example of flood modelling before, there's a range of other activities, depending on the hazard profile and what technical work's required. Sometimes we have the skills and help in-house to be able to do it. Other times we need support from consultants. And that also, it depends on the workload in a given year too. If there's a high workload in a given area, obviously we'd put work out to consultants to buffer that and ensure that things are run sustainably. The other element to consider is, while we have hired well, we've also promoted recently and had a range of other staff changes. So next year I'd expect to go back to a bit more of a slightly consultant-heavy model as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Jean-Luc. Thanks for making yourself available in your busy schedule. Thank you very much indeed. And now on to engineering. Right.
Thank you. So engineering's key function is to operate and manage our schemes and rivers, to provide flood protection, flood conveyance through our river systems, and land drainage activities. We are structured into 4 teams, operations and maintenance teams that look after our schemes predominantly. We've got rivers teams that tend to look after our rivers right across Otago, outside of the scheme boundaries. We've got a assets and project delivery team. They've got a couple of key functions. They deliver our capital program. They also look after our asset management functions. Their key driver is linked to our infrastructure strategy. And then we've got another team that looks after a lot of our kind of support functions. We've got engagement people in there that look after a number of our engagement activities we undertake across the year, including our liaison groups. We've got a bit of a regulatory function in there that looks after our bylaw that protects our assets. We've got some specialist procurement and contract support in there as well. So we do tend to manage some reasonable sized construction contracts. Of course, a large part of our function is in flood response, and that involves a lot of pre-event work. So when John Luke's team tells us that we need to pay attention to the weather in a big hurry, the team gets out and starts prepping for an event that's coming. Then through the event, there's a lot of monitoring goes on. Teams out right across the network, keeping an eye on what's going on. And then after the event is passed, depending on scale and what goes on, we've normally got a fair bit of cleanup to do, and that might involve setting up prepared work programs and things like that, which can be often quite substantial work and generally on top of our BAU. We do run quite a number of projects. We've got a number of construction projects that are underway at any particular time. They tend to be more often in reasonably high value and fairly lumpy spends going across the year, spanning multiple years. We're undertaking race reviews, we've got bylaw reviews coming up. We're undertaking assessments of our schemes on a pretty regular basis, identifying deficiencies and where work needs to be undertaken. There is 25 of us in the team, equates to 24 and a half FTE. Yeah, happy to take questions.
I just, I was recently at the Ardley Golf Course with you, and you'll be interested to know that we weren't playing golf. We were actually at a workshop on river management, and never got the opportunity to play golf. So, look, to me, and the response that I got from the good bunch of people that were there, they thought that was an excellent session, I'm sure, and hopefully staff got something pretty good out of that. Is that something you're planning to do more of? And what did you feel of doing that activity?
Yes, we are planning to do more of that sort of activity. We have been making quite a concerted effort over the last couple of years, particularly to increase our engagement activities out into the community. The liaison groups that have been established through in the Clutha and the Taieri have been really beneficial to us, and I hope beneficial to the community as well. And in our rivers space, yes, we're starting down a path of trying to engage at a more succinct catchment level with those communities. So yeah, the activity that we did the Shea community up there was the start of that. Yes.
And just further, so under the engineering, so we have all this various flood protection assets around the area. How often are we communicating to the public that this is the level of flood protection you have, and if we get an event that goes above that, you may be compromised? So are we confident that our communities understand the level of protection that they are actually getting?
What's you about to say question? So we communicate that to the communities reasonably regularly. We undertake community drop-in sessions where that's often a part of the conversation is the level of protection that's provided by the schemes. The level of service does vary across the schemes and different areas of the scheme, so it is a reasonably complex conversation to have. Links in with the work that our actual colleagues do as well in their flood modelling and in the flood space.
Further questions? Sorry, Tom.
Also, we're on, Phil. I think just add to that. But we have undertaken a traditional model of getting that kind of information out to communities, so it's available, see if they want it, that sort of thing. But my reading of the situation is that people's, if you're talking about a community like Mosgiel or Balclutha, their understanding of their level of protection and when they need to act or what might be a consequence of an event, all of that sort of stuff, we could do better on. And it's a bit of a joint exercise between Brett's team and our civil defence functions through our community response groups and all of that sort of stuff. So there's still work to do there. I wouldn't say we're in a final position yet or a target position. We've got a bit to do, but by the same token, as Brett was alluding to before, we've made big inroads in terms of how we're communicating our relationships with key members of the community have strengthened substantially, and we'll keep walking down that path, and I expect that outcome's not far away.
That's all right. You sure? Happy? Comfortable? Andrew?
Just with regards to the 30-year infrastructure strategy, trying to get my head around, I compare it to someone who owns a house, or most of us own a house, and every 7 or 8 years you've got to paint. If it's a wooden house, you paint it every 7 or 8 years, so at least you maintain the asset. So I just see your CapEx budget is 13.5, but over 13.5 mil. And are we trending upwards in terms of the overall, you know where I'm coming from, Tom, the overall, we're getting all our CapEx done. So does that mean we're getting to a stage where the overall age of the assets that we have is coming down? You see where I'm coming from? I know we're talking about 26, 27, but are we making progress in that space?
You will see this, you're right, you will see this through the 30-year infrastructure strategy. We'll give you an assessment of where we're at in terms of asset age, asset condition, all of that sort of stuff. As you know, the answer to that question in terms of the risk you carry or the outcomes you're trying to achieve might change depending on whether or not you bought a 100-year-old villa or a brand new place in New South Wales.
I appreciate in this space you can't sweat the asset.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah.
But are we? Yeah.
Well, I guess the analogy I give is we have got some older infrastructure out there built to standards that were established at the time and were fit for purpose at the time, but that haven't been tested against the community's expectations for some time. We have had, for instance, we've had some decent flood events, but we haven't had the types of overtopping style flood events that we've seen up north in the last little while. Our infrastructure hasn't been entirely overwhelmed for quite some time. 1999 would be the example for Lower Clutha, and the current incarnation of the flood scheme on the Taieri might be a never in terms of that total overwhelm. So while the asset condition stuff is all important and we are on top of that, and our capital program is making good headway into dealing with the issues where they have arise, we do have an old set of infrastructure built to an old set of standards. So the analogy would be, we've got a very tidy villa that is in good nick, and in terms of those capital expenditure levels, they're appropriate, and it's not a big bow wave coming. The caveat on that is that all needs to be considered within your thinking around what level of service is appropriate. Because if that level of service needs to change, then you need to plan for change, and that would be where you see big costs.
Like the question before, I didn't acknowledge that there's a revenue stream that comes in to offset that 13.6.
That is another really good point. 60% of a significant proportion of that 13 mil is being partnership funded by central government.
The questions? Thank you, Brett. Now, online, Matt. It says on here you're going to be online, but it's a very clear picture.
Yes. Look, great to see you all. The Emergency Management Otago exists to assist all Otago councils in meeting their responsibilities under the CEDAM Act, the National Plan and the National Strategy. We're a little bit unique in terms of work groups within the regional council, and that we have additional expectations on us to respond and answer expectations set by our joint committee, which is the collective governance board for us, as well as our coordinating executive group, which obviously Richard sits on as well. So we have to sort of meet those expectations. That manifests in our group plan that sets our vision, deliverables, objectives for the region, and then we go about delivering those as well. So in terms of wider context for the team, we've been quite settled now. The work plan's been settled, well settled over the last 5 years. FTE count's been well settled over that time as well. We are, however, in the stage of sort of gearing up for the amount of reform that's coming our way. I note that the Bill number 2 is 11th on the order list of Parliament yesterday, so we're likely to see that in the near future. In terms of team breakup and function, we have a mixture of team focused on functional delivery, mainly based here in Dunedin, and they cover things like training capability, stakeholder engagement, and then we have a team embedded within every council, delivering functions within that council. Our work plan is broadly broken up into 3 areas around managing risk, effective response to recovery from emergencies, and enabling, empowering, and supporting community resilience. So some of the examples of managing risk is ongoing support for the AF8 project. We're a foundational member of that project and continue to support it today. And another example is the tsunami study that we're doing in concert with Jean-Luc's team that's planned for this year. When we're looking at effective response to recovery from emergencies, we support a cohort of about 350 council staff around the region, maintaining levels of training and capability. We provide operational platforms for response, as well as BAU activity training, maintaining training records, equipment records, etc., websites, community alerting platforms, as well as a VHF network for the region. When we're stepping into the enabling and empowering community resilience, we support a network of about 65 community resilience groups. We facilitate networks across welfare coordination, rural advisory, lifeline support. So we're doing a lot of that sort of that glue across those areas. Again, as I say, things are relatively settled for us at the moment. Ongoing activities year to year are quite set in terms of budget. When you're looking at the sheet you've got in front of you, probably the items to focus on would be the tsunami study. Now, of note, we've already split that across 2 years to reduce upfront burden in terms of cost, and some of the deployable capability stuff as well, which we've decided to meter some of that delivery just to reduce cost as well. So that's largely us in a nutshell. Happy to take any questions.
Chanel.
Just a question, and I'm going to come back to this with the other groups around courses, conferences, and trainings. Can you just loosely across the organisation, everyone's allocated, it looks about $1,000 per person across the organisation. I will come back to that. But for you guys, what does the 36 encompass? 36,000, I think.
So that a lot of that training, we focus on controller development. So there's only really one prescribed course at the moment that's supported by Massey University. To put an individual through that is around $10,000 for one person, and there's an expectation that everyone that we want fulfilling the role of a regional controller undertakes at least that training as a base level.
Yeah, and I'll be coming back to this in context of I'm a big believer in continuing professional development. I've had that discussion with Richard before. I just want to make sure that our organisational spend on courses and conferences is sized correctly for what we're trying to achieve and where we need our staff to be. I noticed Alex before said that, you've got internal capacity for training as well, but sometimes I'd just like to be reassured that we aren't taking an easier way, that we're taking the right way and our spend is sized correctly.
Yep, and probably further to that, we have got access to moderate fund from the Tertiary Education Commission. So we access about $80,000 a year, and that supports both external training providers to come in. It also recoups some of our costs, and we can also utilise it for staff development as well.
Thank you.
Neil.
Was that me, Kevin, you were saying? Sorry.
Neil, yep.
Yeah, cool, thanks. Hey, thanks, Matt. I'm interested to understand about how involved understanding our TAs are in the work that we're doing. Like, obviously, they know this team that we've got in place in their offices, but as part of their old long-term plan processes, are they over what is being done in this space, or are they just simply deflect it all our way and haven't really got any close contact at do I say staff and governance level?
Bit of a loaded question, Neil.
That's why you got it.
Yeah. Look, to varying degrees, we've provided for this LTP cycle, we've provided advice to all councils on some generic measures that they could consider. Whether they choose to adopt those is entirely a matter for them.
Cool. I guess just going forward, it would be good for maybe the joint committee to see the outcomes of that, because it might just send a reinforcing message that could be required, perhaps. And I'm not saying it is or isn't. It's not a criticism of anybody, but just really think it's an important part of what we do, because in the past, the stuff was done poorly by TAs. In a far better place now going forward, but it's really about, I think, the governance and the leaders and the TAs to understand what's happening in the space and the level of input that's required and the contribution they need to make, particularly when I look and see how we're off track with some of the training and capability stuff, which I assume refers to those in the TAs.
Yeah, and look, I will comment that the reform program that we're expecting to arrive imminently deals with that in two distinct ways. One, there's a direct accountability for chief executives now to provide that resource. And secondly, there's now proposed amendments to the Local Government Act that essentially requires councils within their long-term planning to give effect to the group plan. So, so there's some mechanisms there that they're looking to resolve as part of that reform.
Yeah, because am I correct to say that our budget doesn't include the TA's cost of training their staff?
No, their own staff time, facilities, etc., and even the support that they want to offer into community groups.
Yeah.
If there's support around, I like to call it target hardening or resilience activity into community facilities, that's all local cost.
Yeah, I guess what that highlights to me is it'd be kind of good for us to know as part of their LT processes to be feedback into us what they're proposing. But that could be more at a governance level for the joint committee, perhaps.
Yep.
Thanks.
Agreed.
The questions? I suppose, Matt, that would lead me to think that through this long-term plan process, and I realise there's changes coming from up above, but it would be very good for us to know if you had a feeling of any particular areas that had a weakness in the system that we as governors could assist, and that may not necessarily be a funding mechanism, but it may be a lobbying work. So it'd be, again, if we've got the overarching responsibility, if you had any, and that could be directed to us to assist, that we're making sure that everyone, this whole process is, if an event happens, that we're right on top of things. So it appears that that's happening every time something's happened. We're getting very good reports. So we want to make sure that that's happening everywhere. So don't hesitate to approach us to assist.
Probably to that end, I will just comment that I think, we've had a lot of focus. If we think about a 4-hour construct, we have had a lot of focus in that readiness response area. There is a real shift in an expectation set around the work that we do in the reduction phase as well as the recovery phase. So there's some expectations around that we need to understand what they mean.
Excellent. Thank
you. This area is going to be one that's going to require quite a bit of conversation. There are some, the government is very clear that they are lifting the bar in terms of expectations of civil defence. the difference here obviously is there's the joint committee oversight that will give direction and approve the work that Matt is planning with the team and with the TAs in response. And then that effectively will come back and will be a request for this table to sign it off as part of the rates package. So we will need to ensure that you are well informed about the decisions that the joint committee are making, and Neil will be across this, and the reasons for those decisions in response to the new legislation, because you will be asked to, well, I can safely say this, you will be asked to sign off an increase to the civil defence rate as a direct result of the expectations coming out of this new act. So we need to make sure that you are well across the reasons for that and what we will be delivering with that increase in rates funding that is going to be requested in the civil defence space.
Further questions, Matt? So the standard of preparation is going to be increased across the country as a result of that act, isn't it?
That's the intention.
So do we have clarity in terms of how we stack up with the expectations that are going to be set?
No, although one of the features of the new act is an assurance regime that comes with that. So they'll start to measure. NEMA haven't measured, or previously Ministry of Civil Defence haven't actually measured CEDM groups since 2015. So there is no sort of objective measure across groups, but that's coming.
And so for budget considerations for long-term plan, will we know that in advance consultation, or will we just length the string here?
No, in advance. I think,
we'll know some of it.
Yeah.
We won't have all of the direction from NEMA to inform it, but we'll have enough to be able to have the conversation. It's obviously still to be signed off. The expectation it gets through the House before they rise, but there's a lot on that list still. This has been a priority, and Minister Mitchell's been very clear on that. We won't have all of the answers in terms of how NEMA are intending to give effect to some of these, but we'll have enough of an understanding to be able to have a good discussion at joint committee and then bring a good discussion back to this table.
Thank you. And Hilary?
Could we have an indication somewhere as this unfolds what the TAs, what it's costing them, or what their equivalent and their part in the group joint committee thing is? Because I presume that what the government's sort of imagining down the track is that it will be an Otago-wide sort of one council thing rather than a group of whole lots of people having. So if we could get an idea of what's currently happening in each, and whether the new legislation would anticipate they all need more something, or just where we fit in with that package that we expect.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Excellent. Kate, sorry, Kate.
And sorry, I've been slightly doing a different job, but I don't think this question has been asked. We do this regionally rated, but in reality, I think the services that are given out are going to be concentrated where there's large populations in urban areas. And while there's coordination into the rural areas, a lot of that is make sure that you're looked after for 2 to 7 days, because you may not get help. That's my understanding what the messaging has been, and I think that's still consistent with what things are going to be.
No, look, there's going to be a real shift for us in that risk identification space, and we are going to be quite reliant on the work that Jean-Luc's team is producing, particularly around both the regional exposure study and that prioritisation framework.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to be reliant on that to guide our investment, our focus, and our activity in terms of BAU function. Of course, in terms of response, it's on the scenario at hand and what's the most pressing. So it's going to change from scenario to scenario. But in terms of BAU investment and where we put our time and our energy, that's going to be largely guided by the work that Jean-Luc's team does.
I think too, Kate, what I'd add to that in terms of the direction I think your question's going is we do rate I think, uniform charge, Nick, for our group costs across the region, and then we flex those resources depending on where the greatest need is. The districts are already paying within their TA rates for civil defence response as well, which probably reflects the scale of the population and the risk that they pose and how often they have to activate during the year. So ours is sort of upper level, and the team, Matt and the team, will just flex based on what's required. And then down a level, there is specific investment
And I
at district
presume,
level
yeah.
as well. So it is a. I know where you're going, and I understand and agree that, there's obviously risk in population, and therefore they do tend to get more of the resource. But I think the approach we've taken as group is responsible across the board, and we will, those resources go. For example, 2 weeks ago, the whole team went north, which we haven't done, but they could do that. And then in other cases, we've had significant help down in the Clutha space, and obviously through in Central as well. So that's sort of how it's put together.
And as I was asking the question, I suppose the urban areas have generally the higher rate value. It has been very clear that we're careful about how we rate though, because it can have a huge bearing on effect and value.
Yep.
Thank you.
And my apologies, right from the very start, I introduced you only as science and resilience. So my apologies. And thanks to your team for putting it together, from Matt, Brett, John, Luke, Eve, and Tom, yourself. So thanks for that information, and we look forward as we develop our long-term plan. I'm going to take a wee break now for 5 minutes and go talk to Jasmine and possibly Dor. And we've got lunch in an hour's time, so we might, without forcing directorates to do things too quickly, we might get a bus here earlier. Or we can. No, we might. I'm going to talk to these two first.